AITA for letting my wife call me useless in court until the judge exposed my true identity? You are sitting in a family court listening to your wife of 24 years say in front of a judge that you are a useless husband who does not understand finances. You do not yell. You do not protest. You do not defend yourself. You stay silent because you know silence is your best weapon. You have spent 20 years working in forensic auditing, tracking fraud for companies that bill billions, and your wife just made the biggest mistake of her life by underestimating you in front of someone who knows how to ask the right questions. What the judge discovered that day was not just who the gentleman sitting at the defendant's table was. It was who the lady was who called him useless while misusing his dying mother's accounts. The air in the Maricopa County Family Court smelled of disinfectant and old paper. That smell that sticks to public buildings no matter how many times they clean them. The clock above the judge's bench read 9:14 in the morning when Sharon finished speaking. He is a useless husband. He does not understand finances. He never understood. She said it without anger, without emotion. It was like someone reading a conclusion they reached years ago and already considered an established fact. I stayed motionless with my hands spread out on the table, palms down. I learned a long time ago that clenched fists invite interpretations. Still hands do not. Judge Carolyn Hayes did not respond immediately. She took off her reading glasses, left them on the file, and looked at Sharon's lawyer with an expression I knew well, that of someone who has just detected an inconsistency. "Counselor," she said with a calm and precise voice, "are you certain you understand Mr. Harlan's professional background?" Counselor Victor Klein blinked. "Yes, Your Honor, he works in operations, risk management, I believe." The judge tilted her head slightly. "And are you sure that is the whole picture?" A pause, not long, but enough for the entire courtroom to feel it. Sharon turned toward me. Her expression closed up a bit. It was not fear yet, but something had changed. The air had shifted. "My name is David Harlan. I am 53 years old. I was married to Sharon for 24 years, and until 3 weeks before that hearing no one, in any conversation or in any document, had ever suggested that I was incapable of managing my own life. But I am going to go back to the beginning because to understand what happened in that courtroom, you need to understand who Sharon was, who I was, and who my mother was. I am a forensic auditor, not the kind that appears on the news or testifies in spectacular trials. I am the kind that works in silence. I review financial systems and document inconsistencies. I advise companies when something does not add up. I have been doing this for 20 years in the Phoenix area, first for an international firm and then as an independent consultant. My job consists of finding what people hide, patterns that are not announced, money that moves where it should not. The difference between what someone says and what the numbers show is a silent job, without celebrations, without applause. Sharon always described it as shuffling papers. Our marriage worked for years on parallel tracks. We shared a house in the Arcadia neighborhood of Phoenix. We raised 2 children, Brandon, 27, and Jessica, 24. We coordinated schedules, but our internal lives rarely crossed. Sharon thrived on being seen, competent, admired, and indispensable. At the kids' parent-teacher conferences, she was the mom who organized everything. At the neighborhood block parties, she was the one who brought the biggest tray. At family dinners, she was the one who spoke the loudest. I thrived on systems, order, tracking, and precision. Where she needed an audience, I needed data. Where she sought applause, I sought patterns. Gradually, without me being able to pinpoint the exact moment, Sharon started taking control of everything that required a signature. She moved our savings to another bank without consulting me. "I found a better rate at Chase," she said as if it were a favor. She listed herself as the primary contact for the health insurance. She told the kids to ask me about anything except money, because their dad did not like dealing with that. When I tried to gently resist, she framed it as my reluctance. "You hate responsibility," she would say with that tone of someone stating the obvious. "I am helping you." And because I did not want to fight, because I had spent 24 years convinced that domestic peace was more valuable than being right, I let it go. Every small concession seemed harmless at the time, but small concessions pile up like leaks. One does nothing. 100 collapsed the roof. The first time Sharon called me useless was not in a courtroom. It was at our kitchen table on a night that smelled of burnt coffee. Brandon had just started college. The house was quieter than ever. "And your plan?" she asked without looking at me, sorting mail with quick, irritated movements. Plan for what? I sighed. For everything, David. For your career, for us. You just float. I did not answer. Back then I confused contention with maturity. I thought silence prevented fights from becoming scars. What I did not understand is that silence can be reassigned meaning. Over time, Sharon transformed mine into proof that I was what she said, a passive, disconnected, useless man. When my mom, Evelyn, suffered a mild stroke 8 months ago, Sharon offered to handle the logistics, medical appointments, bank paperwork, documents. Let me take that off your shoulders, she said. You focus on the caregiving. I let her. My mom trusted Sharon, or maybe she trusted the marriage. Either way, papers were signed in moments of exhaustion. Accounts were accessed out of convenience. Sharon became the point of contact with institutions that previously dealt directly with my mom. Then my mom died. 3 weeks after the funeral, Sharon filed an emergency petition in family court asking to be appointed as my temporary conservator of finances, not over my mom's estate, over me. She alleged that I was incapable of recognizing financial exploitation, incapable of managing assets responsibly, and emotionally compromised by chronic detachment. In 48 hours, my personal accounts were frozen for review. The bank notification arrived by email at 7:14 in the morning on a Wednesday while I was making coffee in the kitchen. Dear Mr. Harlan, by judicial order, your accounts have been temporarily restricted. I read the email 3 times, not because I did not understand the words, but because I had a hard time believing Sharon had gone so far. My main client, a manufacturing company in Mesa that I had audited for 6 years, put me on administrative pause as a precaution. The finance director called me personally. David, it is not that we doubt you, but until the legal situation is resolved, we cannot have you in the systems. It is policy. I understand, I told him. And I did understand. That is how systems work when there is an alert. It does not matter who you are. The protocol does not distinguish between guilty and accused. My access to certain systems was suspended. Years of stable work reduced to a waiting period. The word incompetent had not been said out loud yet, but it floated in every corporate email, in every cautious call, in every averted gaze. Brandon stopped answering my calls. I sent him a message. Are you okay? He replied 3 hours later. Mom says you need help. Jessica sent a single message. Dad, I do not know what to think. Mom is very upset. That night, I slept on the couch in my study. Sharon did not ask me to. She did not need to. The message was clear. In this house, I no longer had a voice. In the early hours of the morning, while I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, I heard Sharon talking on the phone in the kitchen. I did not get up to spy. There was no need. The walls of the Arcadia houses are thin, and her voice carried that confidence of someone who believes they have won. Everything is going according to plan, she said. The hearing is in 2 weeks. By then the judge will see exactly what I want her to see. A passive man who cannot handle his own finances. She laughed. A short, efficient laugh, the same laugh she used when things went well for her. I closed my eyes and let the anger pass like a wave, not because I did not feel it, but because anger is a bad counselor when what you need is precision. The next morning I opened my computer and started where I always start, with the records. I did not accuse Sharon. I did not confront her. I did not call anyone to defend myself. I requested account statements. I asked for transaction histories. I built a timeline. Evelyn was meticulous with her finances her whole life. Every Sunday morning with her coffee and a pastry, she would review her accounts in a hardcover notebook she bought at a local office supply store on Camelback Road. She kept receipts in envelopes labeled with her retired teacher handwriting. Papers are memory, she used to tell me. Do not lose them. When she started forgetting small things after the stroke, I noticed it before Sharon did. Or maybe Sharon noticed and said nothing. Either way, she stepped in with the confidence of someone who knows what she is doing. She made appointments and went to the bank. Let me take care of the boring stuff, she would say. You already do enough. My mom trusted her. Sharon was family. She was warm. She was capable. When she brought documents to sign, Evelyn did not question it. She was tired. She was recovering. She assumed good faith. I also assumed it. The first warning sign came months later when Sharon casually mentioned she had reorganized some things in my mom's accounts to simplify. I asked what she meant. She dismissed me with a wave of her hand. I just put things in order. Do not worry. But worry is a habit that is not easily unlearned. After the funeral, while the house filled with the usual rituals, food trays, condolence cards, and conversations that never get to the point, I sat in my study and opened my computer. I started where I always start, with the records. I did not accuse Sharon. I did not confront her. I requested account statements. I asked for transaction histories. I built a timeline. Patterns are not announced. They reveal themselves slowly if you have patience. It took me a whole day before I noticed the alignment. Small withdrawals, consulting fees, transfers just below the amounts that trigger automatic notifications, all clustered on specific dates. The dates Sharon visited my mom alone. I marked each one, compared the data, and built a spreadsheet. By the end of the week, I had identified multiple unauthorized transactions totaling tens of thousands of dollars that did not correspond to any documented expense. When I asked Sharon about one of them, carefully and neutrally, she smiled. Do not worry. It is under control. That is when it clicked. Not with anger, but with recognition. Sharon did not see herself as crossing a line. She saw herself correcting an imbalance. She believed she deserved control because she believed she had carried the family for years, and she genuinely believed I was never going to notice. That belief was the most dangerous thing she brought into the courtroom. I went to my mom's house on a gray Thursday morning. The Tempe neighborhood was quiet with that suburban Phoenix silence that mutes the colors when it is cloudy. The same stucco houses, the same swept sidewalks, the same citrus trees my mom watered every third day as if they were children. I parked in the driveway and sat there longer than necessary, my hands on the steering wheel, watching the condensation drip on the windshield. The house did not look like the scene of a serious situation. It looked like a life paused in the middle of a sentence. I let myself in with the key I always carried. The air smelled of lavender and old books. The smell of Evelyn. The living room was tidy but lived in. The blanket folded over the arm of the couch, the public library books on the side table, her reading glasses upside down on the television, exactly where she always left them. In the kitchen, the wall calendar still showed the month of her death. A magnet from the Arizona State Fair held a pharmacy receipt. Her coffee mug, the white one with the phrase, "The teacher retired, but the coffee did not," was washed and upside down on the drying rack. Someone had washed it after the funeral, probably Sharon. I stopped for a moment with that mug in my hands. It weighed almost nothing, but it carried 30 years of Sunday mornings where my mom sat at this exact table to review her accounts with the precision of a certified accountant, which is what she was before retiring from the high school, where she taught math for 25 years. Evelyn did not trust technology for her finances. She trusted her notebook, her handwriting, and her ability to add in her head faster than any calculator. I put the mug back where it was and went to the spare room. I went straight to the spare room where my mom kept her records. A gray, plain, 4-drawer metal filing cabinet with labels in her impeccable handwriting. Utilities, medical, bank, taxes. After my dad's death, she told me, "If anything happens to me, you know where to look." I opened each drawer. At first glance, everything seemed in order, but after an hour the patterns began to unravel. Reopened envelopes, out-of-sequence account statements, gaps where the originals should be. I took everything out onto the bed and started organizing by date. That is where I found the power of attorney. It was not hidden. It did not need to be. It was in a folder marked legal, carefully filed among older documents. My mom's signature was there, real and shaky, consistent with the weeks after the stroke. The language was broad, too broad. It granted authority over financial decisions without significant limitations. But what caught my attention was not the scope of the document. It was the date. It was signed on a day when my mom's neurologist had recorded increased confusion and reduced executive functions, not total incompetence. Vulnerability. Enough to make consent questionable. Enough for pressure to work. I photographed the document and kept looking. The notebook came next. It was tucked between 2 photo albums in the hallway closet. Brown hardcover, soft on the edges from so much use. The kind of object you do not buy by accident. My mom liked things that lasted. The first entry was 15 months old. Sharon called today, said she wants to help more with the accounts. She seemed sincere. I want to believe. The entries were short at first. Dates, visits, Notes about being tired. Sharon bringing groceries. Sharon asking questions about the bank. Then the tone changed. Cloudy day. Sharon brought papers. Said they were to talk to the bank on my behalf. I signed. I should not have signed. I was too tired to argue. 2 weeks later, better day? Reviewed the papers. Power of attorney. I did not want to give that. I feel ashamed. I do not want to cause problems for David. My chest tightened. I felt that pressure that is not crying, but something before crying, as if the body knows something the mind does not want to process yet. I kept reading. There were more entries. Some were just one line. Sharon came. Brought food. Did not feel well after. Others were longer, with the handwriting becoming increasingly irregular as the months went by. One of them said, "Today I asked Sharon why she moved money from my savings account. She said it was to simplify. She did not explain where it went. She told me not to worry. I hate when people tell me not to worry. It always means there is something to worry about." My mom, even confused, even vulnerable, kept thinking like the math teacher she was, with logic, with a healthy distrust, with the certainty that numbers do not lie even if people do. The last entry was addressed to me. If you are reading this, something went wrong. I did not forget who you are. I know what you do. I trusted you would see what I could not. Papers are memory, son. Do not lose them. I sat on the floor of that closet for a long time, not crying, just breathing. My mom had prepared for this without knowing exactly how it would unfold. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She left a trail and trusted I would follow it. That afternoon I called my lawyer, attorney Rachel Bennett, office in a professional tower downtown on Central Avenue. I told her everything. Rachel did not react with emotion. She asked precise questions, dates, names, medical context. She listened the way investigators listen, without interrupting, without filling the silences. "This is not just misuse of a power of attorney," she said when I finished. "It is financial exploitation during vulnerability, and that is worse. I know. That is why we have to be careful." She explained how these cases unfold. Banks flag irregular activity. Adult Protective Services can intervene. Courts analyze capacity on a spectrum, not as a binary. Sharon's petition was not only aggressive. It was risky. If the court concluded my mom was vulnerable at the time of the signings, everything Sharon touched would be scrutinized. "What do you want to do?" she asked me. "I want the truth to come out on its own without me forcing it." Rachel stayed quiet for a moment. "Then we wait and we prepare." The 2 weeks before the hearing were an exercise in discipline that tested everything I learned in 20 years of auditing. I lived deliberately within Sharon's expectations. I did not confront her. I did not accuse her. I behaved exactly how she needed me to behave. Quiet, docile, seemingly defeated. I answered her lawyer's questions minimally in the preliminary video hearing. When they asked about my job, I answered simply, without embellishing. Internal audit consultant, risk analysis. I did not mention the trials where I had testified. I did not mention the companies I had helped recover millions in frauds. I did not mention anything that could alert them. Sharon watched me during the pre-hearing via video conference. I saw her relax as I responded with simplicity. She smiled when I did not explain myself. She nodded when I kept my answers short. She confused contention with surrender. That was her biggest mistake, and I needed it. One night, 4 days before the hearing, Sharon entered my study without knocking. I was reading a book, not documents. I had learned to leave nothing visible. "Are you going to fight?" she asked from the door with the voice of someone who already knows the answer. "Fight? What?" "For control of your accounts. For everything." I looked at her. Beneath the question, there was another question. "Are you going to let me win without resisting?" "I am going to tell the truth," I told her. Nothing more. Something crossed her face. Relief. Suspicion. And she left without saying anything else. She closed the door softly. That gesture told me she was confident. And Sharon's confidence was exactly what I needed her to bring to the courtroom. In the background, Rachel was working. She requested account statements through the proper channels. She coordinated with bank compliance officers who flagged transactions that did not match declared purposes. She discreetly notified Adult Protective Services, triggering a parallel review, not an accusation, an inquiry. By the time the hearing approached, multiple systems were already moving independently. That mattered. The truth carries more weight when it does not depend on a single voice. And so we arrived at the Maricopa County Family Court at 9:14 in the morning on a Tuesday. To Sharon saying, "He is a useless husband." To Judge Carolyn Hayes taking off her glasses and asking the question that cut through the courtroom air. The judge turned to me for the first time. "Mr. Harlan, you have remained silent. Is it intentional?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Why?" "Because this petition relies on presumptions, and presumptions tend to crumble when facts are presented too soon." The courtroom paused. Sharon held her breath. "Very well, Ms. Bennett. You may proceed." Rachel stood up slowly, without drama. She rested a hand on the table and spoke in a tone that suggested she was not there to argue, only to clarify. "Your Honor, this petition is based on the assertion that Mr. Harlan is incapable of recognizing financial exploitation. What we intend to demonstrate is that the opposite is true, and that the exploitation occurred precisely because someone believed he was not going to notice." She presented the account statements. A timeline appeared on the monitor that the court clerk turned on. Dates on the left, transactions on the right. Withdrawals, transfers, payments labeled as administrative consulting and management fees. These transactions coincide with visits by Mrs. Harlan to the residence of Evelyn Harlan, widow of Harlan. Not to medical appointments, not to the bank, to the residence. I watched as Sharon shifted in her chair, a posture adjustment, crossing her arms. I knew her. She was recalculating. Her mouth formed a thin line. The same expression she made when something did not go as she planned. The same one she made when our kids decided to study outside of Phoenix, and she could not control the outcome. Counselor Victor Klein half stood up. "Objection. Correlation does not imply causation." "Overruled," said the judge without looking up from the file. "Continue, Counselor." Rachel did not stop. She addressed the power of attorney with the same precision with which I would have presented an audit finding. No adjectives, no drama, just data. This document was signed on a date when Mrs. Harlan's neurologist recorded increased confusion and reduced executive functions in the patient, not total incompetence. Vulnerability. Enough to make consent questionable. Enough for pressure to be effective. The judge leaned forward. The entire courtroom seemed to lean with her. Even the air seemed to stop for a second, as if the building itself were paying attention. "In the state of Arizona," Rachel continued, "capacity is not binary. Consent obtained during a state of vulnerability, especially without independent legal representation for the grantor, demands scrutiny." Sharon crossed her arms tightly. Victor Klein was scribbling on his notepad with the urgency of someone looking for an exit that does not exist. Following the execution of this document, Mrs. Harlan gained expanded access to Evelyn Harlan's accounts. That access coincides with a marked change in transaction behavior. She showed the next chart. Before and after. My mom's spending habits for a decade, consistent, predictable, meticulous, like those of a math teacher who balanced her accounts every Sunday versus the 6 months following the power of attorney. The difference was visible without needing explanation. Irregular spikes where there used to be flat lines. Unjustified withdrawals where before there were only receipts for utilities, groceries, and pharmacy. Rachel paused. "Your Honor, I believe context is important. Mr. Harlan, can you briefly explain what your professional role has been for the last 20 years? I stood up. "I work in forensic auditing and risk analysis. I help organizations identify irregular financial behaviors and systemic weaknesses. I have testified in court on a few occasions when companies needed to explain findings." Judge Carolyn Hayes nodded. She turned to Counselor Victor Klein. "Counselor, was this background included in Mr. Harlan's capacity evaluation?" Victor Klein hesitated. "We understood his role was limited." "That," the judge replied serenely, "appears to be a presumption." Sharon stood up abruptly. "He does not like attention. He hides behind spreadsheets. That does not make him competent." "Mrs. Harlan, sit down." She did not argue, but her jaw tensed. Rachel resumed. She presented a summary from Adult Protective Services. Not a conclusion, an inquiry. The banks had independently flagged irregularities. A preliminary review was underway. This court was convened because Mrs. Harlan alleged her husband cannot recognize exploitation. However, multiple institutions identified it without him having to ask. The judge clasped her hands. "Mrs. Harlan, you requested emergency authority over your husband's finances. Based on what I have heard, That request seems premature to me. Sharon opened her mouth, closed it. The petition is denied. And given the body of evidence presented and the ongoing independent inquiries, I am referring the file to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for further review. The words fell softly, but they fell. Sharon's shoulders sank, not out of shame, but out of calculation. She had lost control of the timeline. The judge looked at me one last time. "Mr. Harlan, you did well to remain silent." I nodded once. When the gavel hit the bench, I did not feel euphoria. I felt alignment, as if something crooked had finally straightened out. Outside the courtroom, Rachel leaned toward me. "This part is over. The next part will not be like this." I knew that, because when systems start moving, they rarely stop at the first truth they discover. The weeks that followed moved with the methodical slowness of an expanding audit. The banks did what banks do when an inquiry is opened. They expanded the scope. My mom's accounts were examined along with any account Sharon had access to. Transaction histories were requested, not for months, but for years. Each financial institution responded independently, and each response confirmed what I already knew. The pattern was real, sustained, and deliberate. Rachel kept me updated with brief, factual, emotionless calls. Chase responded. "The numbers match your timeline." They scheduled an interview with Sharon for Thursday. The intermediary was identified, an alleged financial advisor without credentials that Sharon hired to move money between accounts. Every piece fit together, not like in the movies where there is a moment of dramatic revelation. In real life, these situations are dismantled the way an engine is taken apart, piece by piece, bolt by bolt, until what is left on the table is a pile of parts that can no longer be assembled into the original story. Sharon tried to regain control. She showed up cooperatively to the interviews, answered emails promptly, and framed every transfer as a misunderstanding. But the investigators listened, then compared the files. The pattern did not change. What changed was Sharon's tone. She stopped calling me incompetent and started calling me manipulative. She told the kids I was weaponizing my job. Each version contradicted the last. Each conversation left more residue. Brandon was the hardest. He called one night with the tense, controlled voice of someone trying not to take sides. "Mom says the judge exaggerated, that you set this all up." I leaned against the kitchen counter and closed my eyes. "What do you think?" A pause long enough to hear the traffic on the other end. "I do not know," he admitted. "She always solved things. You always stayed out of it. Staying out of it is not the same as not paying attention." He exhaled. "Jessica is very upset. Mom told her not to get involved." That tightened something inside me. "Tell her she does not have to choose," I told him. "She just has to be honest with herself." Brandon did not answer immediately. "Okay," he said. "I will tell her." Jessica called 2 nights later. Her voice was trembling. "Dad, I think I messed something up." "You did not mess anything up. Tell me." She told me she had seen Sharon wearing Evelyn's hoop earrings, the silver filigree ones my mom had cherished for decades and never took off. Family heirlooms. Sharon said my mom had gifted them to her. Jessica did not question it at the time. "I did not tell anyone," Jessica said. "I was afraid Mom would get mad." "You can tell them," I said gently. "You do not have to accuse. Just say what you saw. Is it going to ruin everything?" I thought of my mom's notebook, of her silent preparation, of her trust that I would follow the trail. It is going to clarify things. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office contacted Rachel. The assistant prosecutor, a woman in her 40s with glasses and the expression of someone who has seen enough files not to be impressed by anything, asked for a meeting. No accusations, just an exploratory conversation. Rachel and I met her in a modest conference room in the Maricopa County Attorney's building on Jefferson Street. Gray walls, a rectangular table, styrofoam cups with water. The kind of place where people's lives are decided with the same aesthetic as a government office. She did not waste time. "We are looking at potential charges related to financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Possibly fraud, possibly irregular use of legal instruments, depending on how certain documents were used." "What is next?" I asked. "Reviewing evidence, witness cooperation. If charges are formalized, we will offer a plea deal. If she does not accept it, we move forward." She looked at me carefully. "It is not going to be fast. These cases move slowly." "I am in no hurry," I told her. "I have spent 20 years working on cases that move slowly. I know how to wait." Rachel exchanged a look with me. We had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and it had arrived exactly as she predicted, without fanfare, without drama. Just the gears of a justice system starting to turn, and once in motion, it does not stop easily. Sharon was finally charged. The charges listed financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and irregular use of a power of attorney. Not the maximum charges, enough to anchor the case. Plea negotiations took months. Sharon rejected the first proposal, then the second. She blamed stress. She blamed the marriage. She blamed me. Finally, the documentation closed off all exits. The transfers, the intermediary Rachel tracked down, the timing, the power of attorney executed during documented vulnerability, the lack of independent legal representation for my mom. She accepted a deal. The sentence reflected what these cases usually reflect: a suspended sentence, probation, full restitution with interest, and a permanent ban from acting as a fiduciary or administrator of other people's assets. To cover the restitution, Sharon had to liquidate assets, including a property she had discreetly purchased under a trust she could no longer justify. When Rachel told me, I was not surprised. In 20 years of forensic auditing, I learned that where there is one visible situation, there are always 2 or 3 hidden behind it. The night before the judge accepted the plea deal, Sharon confronted me one last time. She waited until the house was quiet, until the kids had left, until it seemed safe to control the narrative again. "You did this," she said, standing across the room, with the voice of someone who still cannot believe she lost. "You could have stopped this at any moment." I looked at her without anger, without defensiveness. I did not start it, and I cannot stop what I did not create. She laughed. A brittle sound that did not reach her eyes. "You always hide behind procedures and systems. You think you are better than all this. I am not better. I am inside this." Her expression changed. Not exactly to fear, but to calculation. They're going to put me in legal trouble. I did not answer. I was not present when the judge accepted the deal. Rachel did call me afterward. It was over. My job was reinstated. Not immediately. There was a review period, additional disclosures, discreet monitoring. No punishment, just caution. I accepted it. Some systems forgive slowly. Others never forgive. Brandon took months. He wavered between anger and grief. We talked several times, not always well, not always productively. But one Saturday, he showed up at my door with a cardboard box. "I found something in Grandma's things," he said. A bank notice from years ago addressed to Evelyn, forwarded to Sharon's email. It was among Mom's old papers. She never mentioned it to me. I watched his hands shake holding the paper. "It is okay," I told him. "You do not have to fix this." "I know," he replied. "I just needed you to know that I see it now." That was enough. Jessica started therapy. She asked if I wanted to go with her to a session. I went. We did not talk about Sharon. We talked about Evelyn, about her notebook, about her retired teacher handwriting, about the phrase I read every night before going to sleep. "Papers are memory, son. Do not lose them." Sharon never apologized. She fulfilled the terms, showed up to mandatory appointments, paid the restitution, and followed the probation conditions. But true remorse requires looking inward, and Sharon had spent too long outsourcing that work. I stopped waiting for it. Months later, I received one last letter, not from Sharon, but from the court. Confirmation that the restitution had been completed and that Evelyn's estate was officially closed. That chapter sealed on a Sunday morning. One of those Phoenix Sundays with a perfect blue sky and the smell of fresh pastries drifting from the corner bakery. I sat at my mom's kitchen table one last time. I was going to put the house up for sale. The kids agreed. It was time. But before calling the real estate agent, I did what my mom would have done. I made myself a coffee with cream, took her notebook out of the drawer, and opened it. On the first page, I read each entry slowly, unhurriedly, like someone reviewing an account statement one last time before closing the folder. When I reached the last entry, I trusted you would see what I could not. I closed the notebook, hugged it against my chest, and sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of a house that no longer needed protection. I put the notebook in my briefcase. I packed the originals from the filing cabinet in a box marked Evelyn Harlan, "Do not throw away." I would donate the furniture to an association that helps retired teachers. I would take down the curtains. The patio plants, the citrus trees my mom cared for as if they were students, Jessica would take to her apartment. But the notebook and the papers were coming with me because papers are memory and no one was going to take this memory away from me. Before leaving, I did one last thing. I went to the kitchen, washed the white mug with the teacher retired, but the coffee did not. I dried it carefully and put it in my briefcase next to the notebook. Not because I needed it, but because my mom would have wanted it with me. I closed the door to Evelyn's house with the key I always carried. I put it in the envelope I was going to give the real estate agent. The next day, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the stucco facade, the citrus tree out front she watered every third day, the window of the room where I found the notebook. "I came through, Mom," I said to no one. "I saw what you could not." The phoenix wind answered me by moving the leaves of the citrus tree, and that was enough. One night, months after everything ended, I was sitting in the kitchen of my own apartment, the same table where Sharon called me useless for the first time, with a cup of coffee and my mom's notebook in front of me. There was nothing left to look for, no more patterns to track. Just a man reading his mother's handwriting in an old notebook, remembering that she trusted he would see what she could not. I thought about the word useless, about how easily it was said, about how much confidence was placed on it. Silence does not mean ignorance. Calm does not mean weakness. And being underestimated is only dangerous if you believe it too. Sharon thought my stillness made me invisible. She thought my restraint meant disconnection. She thought papers were something that could be rearranged without consequences. She forgot that papers have memory. My mom did not forget, and neither did I. The lesson here is clear. Never hand over total control of your finances or those of your vulnerable family members to a single person, no matter how much you trust them. Demand transparency. Review the documents your parents or grandparents sign when they are sick. And if someone tells you not to worry when you ask about money, that is not care. That is a red flag. Papers are memory. Do not lose them. Comment. Hey friends, this story really stayed with me. I hope it gave you something meaningful to reflect on, too. I've realized how important it is to protect your own self-respect in every relationship. Setting healthy boundaries is one of the most responsible things we can do for ourselves and others. Taking ownership of our finances and our family's well-being shows true care. Sometimes, choosing peace means knowing when to stay calm instead of reacting. Healing begins when we face reality with courage and clarity. Real kindness always includes protecting those who can't protect themselves. I encourage you to stay attentive to the important details in your loved ones' lives. Remember, your quiet strength and inner peace can create powerful, positive change. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.